Hi there, and welcome to another weekly update. And kicking off this week and kind of the week that's just gone was a blog post I did about developing with Microsoft Teams, and specifically the use of static tabs and how to create static tabs as a developer, as a Microsoft Teams developer. So I've done a blog post about doing that. Once you understand how manifests work and how application manifests work and how apps hang together, actually creating a static tab is relatively easy. There's some restrictions about where it can be shown. It's really just personal scope, so it won't show up in channels or anywhere like that. But it is still a kind of useful thing to know how to do, because in some cases it's exactly what you need. I am gonna do some more blog posts about the other types of tabs, as well as the other kind of things you can do in Microsoft Teams. But at the moment, that's the one I've done this week. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Botkit. Now, Botkit is a popular bot framework, bot platform for making bots. It's open source and it's kind of popular in the open source community, and it's a very popular way of making Slack bots. Now, the news out that happened this week is that Microsoft Teams now works with Botkit. So what that means is that if you are already a Botkit developer and you make bots using Botkit, you can very easily make those bots work on Microsoft Teams. And that's good news if you're a Botkit developer. I'm actually not a Botkit developer, but I kind of thought this was interesting anyway, because there's a different, deeper story here where it's interesting that Microsoft have taken the time and the effort to make, integrations that enable Botkit developers to open up on Teams, and that's something that probably you wouldn't have seen even 3, 4, definitely 5 years ago, because Microsoft already have a framework for creating bots. They have the Microsoft Bot Framework, and they probably would prefer you to use that than Botkit. And 5 years ago, Microsoft wouldn't have embraced these open source technologies in the way that they are today. They would have said, no, we have Bot Framework, you should be using Bot Framework. That's the supported way of making bots on Teams. It's really interesting that what they've chosen to do instead is embrace Botkit, and it's an open source project. It's on GitHub. They've become a contributor. They've written the work. They've done the work on the team side as well to make it work with Microsoft Teams. And I think that's really interesting, because it kind of does two things for me. It underlines how Microsoft has changed in terms of open source contributions, in terms of embracing open source projects and not mandating the Microsoft way all of the time. But actually also it underlines for me how important Microsoft think that Teams is for developers. They're willing to say, we want Teams to be the center of people's world. And that means they need access, and they need access to information, and they need to be able to communicate with bots. And if those bots aren't built on the bot framework, well, we would rather embrace bots and have people use Teams than kind of stick a line in the sand and be dogmatic about which bot platforms they build them on. So I thought that was really interesting. Also on Teams, more announcements on Teams. For developers is that there is going to be some new tooling coming for developers that's coming around the corner. So this is not, this was announced quite a long time ago, and I think it was in April maybe it was announced as developer tooling, and I kind of took it to mean tools for people developing for Microsoft Teams. Actually it's not, it's just tools for all developers, which is good. It's good to kind of open up to, everybody gets to benefit this way. And the kind of tooling we're talking about is integration with existing tools and solutions that developers use. So for instance, the Microsoft Teams Jira integration. So if you're a Jira user, if you use Service Desk, if you use Jira Core or any of that stuff, then you'll be able to add a tab into a Teams channel, and then from there you'll be able to look at issues from Jira. Same kind of thing for Botkit and GitHub. You'll be able to open up tabs and see pull requests for repositories you're working with. And this kind of complements what's there already today, which is the Teams TFS integration. So today you can do this with Team services using both a tab and a connector. So again, it's good to see Microsoft opening this up to not just other Microsoft technologies, but to solutions and tooling that other people are using in the real world, not necessarily just in that Microsoft bubble. Yeah, so I thought that was really good. Now the big news this week that's come, the big announcement this week is around guest access in Microsoft Teams. So guest access for Microsoft Teams is here. It has been a long time coming. It has been delayed a little bit, but now it's here and it is rolling out to tenants kind of now. So you should probably have this already on your tenant. If you don't, expect to see it soon. And what it means is that from a Teams channel, you'll be able to add other people from outside your company. Now, it's worth knowing that today, those people that you're adding, they need to have Azure AD accounts. Okay, so they can't just be absolutely anybody. It needs to be somebody with an Azure AD account. Coming soon will be the ability to add people with just Microsoft accounts, so MSA accounts, and that will open the field much wider. And actually, it will, I think, right now, by requiring an Azure AD account, really what you're doing is business to business guest access by opening up to Microsoft accounts. So Microsoft accounts is, that's going to really open it up to lots of business to consumer scenarios as well. So that's really interesting because, yeah, I mean, it's good to see. It's good to see this is the direction Microsoft are going. They clearly understand that business to business communication is really important, but there's a lot of value to be had in B2C as well. So it's going to be interesting and to see how that pans out. It'll be interesting to see how this changes Teams use. I think it's going to be interesting for developers as well, because there'll be a lot of additional information. There'll be a lot of users coming in that aren't necessarily on your tenant. So there'll be work there to see how they communicate with any bots or things in the channel. And there might be a different experience then for users. You can see some interesting flows being set up where guest users come in to a team and maybe get, their conversations with the bots are dealt with differently from those from the same company. So that's kind of interesting for Teams developers, because it's changing the landscape on which development platform, development solutions are built. It's changing the rules of the game, if you like. Last week you couldn't have anybody in Teams from outside your company. This week you can, and that changes. Like I say, that kind of changes the playing field. Okay. So just a short one, an interesting article on the Bot Framework blog around HTML. Now, this is a Bot Framework thing, not a Teams thing, but I thought it was interesting anyway, because lots of Teams developers will be writing in the Bot Framework, and one of the channels in the Bot Framework is web chat. And this blog post is around HTML support in web chat. Now, out of the box, HTML is not supported in web chat. So if you write HTML in web chat, it will show up as unrendered HTML. So the main reason for this was consistency of UI. But what's interesting about this blog post is that they start off by saying, this is not supported, you can't do this, and this is why. And that's a fairly standard Microsoft article of, we've made a decision that on balance, this is not a good idea. These are the reasons it's not a good idea. They actually then go on to say, well, that's our official line, but if you want to do it, this is how you can go and do it. And because a lot of the framework stuff and a lot of the web chat, all those integrations, they're all open source and they're all in GitHub. They actually say what you can do is go to GitHub, fork the code, and here's the line to change if you really want to enable HTML support. And that's interesting because in some ways it's a softening of position, but actually it's a really empowering way for developers to understand the problems and the default positions that Microsoft are taking for the 99%, but then have the power to say, I understand that, I understand the risks and the reasoning, but I really need HTML support for the project I'm doing, and therefore I'm willing to take that risk and I'm willing to fork the code base and make the changes myself in order to have a build that I can use that supports HTML. So I thought that was really interesting. It's a really interesting insight into maybe some of the future, the way this gets done in the future, and our interactions with Microsoft and developers' interactions with Microsoft. So I thought that was really interesting. So the final piece of information I want to leave you with is a fantastic blog post on the Tech Community website all about Ignite and about Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business at Ignite. Now, as I said last week, there's been plenty of rumour about both of those products and about announcements that coming up and stuff like that. I've said before, I'm going to stay away from talking and commenting on those rumours until they're properly announced and we can see them in their right context. But this is a really good blog post from someone at Microsoft who understands, and this is interesting because you can, from reading this, you know that Praveen Malu, who wrote this, he understands that what's going to be announced. He knows what people are going to be talking about. He knows what people are talking about now, and this blog post is it's a kind of recognition that there's going to be announcements and there's lots of interesting things that Microsoft want to tell you about both Teams and Skype for Business. And what he's done is he's listed out all of those things on this page so you can keep track during Ignite of everything that's going on. So so there's the keynote, and then he's got a list of all these product deep dive sessions, and it's basically him saying, if you want to get the lowdown on what's going on with Teams and Skype for Business, then make sure you keep track of all these things that are happening. So make sure you go to these deep dive sessions, make sure you go to these deployment sessions, these adoption sessions, these IT manageability sessions, make sure you look at the expo floor for these things, make sure you follow along on the community and these things. So it's a really good shopping list of how to keep up with what's going on with Teams and Skype for Business at Ignite. So really useful blog post. So I'll put that in the kind of links as well. So all right, that's everything for me for this week. Have a great week, and I will talk to you again next Friday.